All right, let's do a review. I'm gonna walk through the PowerPoints that we've used so far this semester, and but I'm not going to spend a lot of time on them because I'm not teaching about these concepts. We've already done that. This is just a reminder for you, so I'll try and move as quickly as I can. Uh, let's start with our terms for critical analysis. We've tried to examine these five in each of the films that we've looked at, and they're narrative, cinematography, editing, acting, and sound. Narrative controlled by director and the writer, sometimes the same person, sometimes not. And then we're looking at story structure. How is it told? Is it a traditional story or is it experimental? Cinematography, what are the images that are contained in the frame? How is it lit? Does the camera move? Does the action and blocking inside move? And then the question I always want you to be asking is, where is the camera? Why did they choose to put it there? Is it helping the narrative or is it just for an effect? Editing, how do we get from one shot to the next? Our common transitions are cut, dissolve, wipes, and most often cuts. Acting, we've talked about this, different styles. Is the actor melodramatic? They often start that way, certainly back in the 20s and 30s. They're stage actors and they're used to playing for the audience in the back row. Actors now have to learn how this medium is different and what they can do with it. And we've seen the growth in acting in the different films that we've witnessed. Sound, is there sound? What's the dialogue like? Is it one person talking, very staccato, another talking after? Or is it overlapped? What kind of music are they using? What kind of sound effects? And of course, this week's movie, sound, it was a critical role. So the first film we saw was a short called Wild Things. And that film was made in Argentina. By the way, that's one of 3 or 4 shorts that are released as part of a feature, and the other ones are just as good as this one. So if you get a chance, look up the other ones. The film is short, it was under 8 minutes, but they got a lot done in 8 minutes, didn't they? One of my favorite shots in the film. Of course, it pans up with them. They stand up, turn around, and see the plane coming right at them. Our first feature was Amelie. We started with that one rather than something from the 40s so that you could get an idea of, we could point to in this film how when all 5 of the elements of filmmaking are working together, you get a wonderful kind of film, and this one certainly was. So I think that it was good to start with that and then move back in time. We did introduce the idea of traditional stories, beginning, middle, and end, traditional story arc. The power of the image. So I started to ask you to pay attention closely to the cinematography and what are they doing within that frame and why. And here's, of course, a still from her personal journey in the House of Horrors. After that, we did go back in time and we went to Italy as well to watch Bicycle Thieves. One of the things that we point out here is how short the medium, the discipline of cinema is, and how we go from something like this film up to an Amelie, and it happens rather quickly. This is not impacting Hollywood as much as they're rebelling against Hollywood and big business and big budgets. It's shot in 1948, right after World War II, and it is its own cinematic movement, which is called Italian neorealism. Here it is. And it lasts about 5 years. So we see 4, maybe 5, depending upon how you classify some of them, but 2 from the Golden Age, 1 from French New Wave, and this is our Italian neorealism. And what does that mean? This is how it's defined. It's shot with many non-professional actors. It's shot on location. No, they don't have big fancy sets. It's very low budget compared to Hollywood budgets. For these filmmakers, ideas are more important than technique. And they look to struggles of the everyday man and woman, family, themes of oppression, injustice, and desperation. We do want you to connect, and I think this happens in each film. Watch the development of these 5 areas. We talk about the narrative in Bicycle Thieves, and would it have made a good Disney picture? That end is heartbreaking, and the fact that his son is there makes the shame of the moment even tougher. And I jump ahead then to the film that we watched, in To Kill a Mockingbird, when there's a similar type scene. You remember when Atticus gets spit in the face? But how does he react? And even though his son witnesses that's not a moment of shame. He turns that into a moment of a teaching moment of pacifism, and not stooping down to this fellow's level. So interesting how both scenes have similar elements, but very, very different messages. Here's a giant camera again. They're using, and those lights just weigh a ton. The editing definitely supports the mood of the film. And then because you have non-actors here, does it work? You know, they go back to this. Experimental filmmakers, even in the 60s and 70s, they use this technique again, and some are successful, but it's tough to do when your actors don't understand the craft of filmmaking. A lot of dubbing, and then street scenes for that. So I asked you to tell me how the narrative is different. Certainly does make a political point, and that being if you're disenfranchised, if you're not represented by a political system that you live in, can you be held accountable to it? I mean, is he really a thief in the sense of the word, if he has to steal that bite to feed his family? Then if you're an artist, and these filmmakers thought they were, do you get a sense that they have a moral obligation to tell this kind of a story? And I ask the question, should film only be for entertainment? Can it? Should it do more? And then we pose the question pretty quickly here, can cinema be considered art and an art form? And if so, what makes it so? Why is The Avengers not considered an art film, and Bicycle Thieves or 400 Blows would be? And again, the idea that neorealism states it's more important the idea is than the technique. You can see how well it was shot for such a low budget. We came back to America then in the golden age of Hollywood on the waterfront with Brando. 1954, it is a morality tale. It's about union violence, corruption, extortion, and racketeering. Falls into that 1920s to the 60s. So it's a big studio production. It's pretty risky for a big studio production, though, in terms of its topic. It does use the medium to make a statement about standing up for what's right. That's a short amount of time to film a feature, and there's a few visual metaphors in there. Has a traditional story arc, was trying to speak to the masses. Even though it's black and white, the time they take to light this, block it, the framing, is much different than Bicycle Thieves was. Good sense of external rhythm. The acting, of course, this is where we start talking about the actors using a technique called method acting. And I believe each of these actors were trained at the Actors Studio. So method acting, they're looking for an emotionally sincere performance. They're trying to find the character within themselves and then let it come out. These are not the kind of performances we saw in Bicycle Thieves. The music is good. It's of its time, dramatic, and it's used well within the film, and certainly that classic car scene. 400 Blows we saw next. This is French New Wave, 1959. French New Wave, meaning the camera has pen. This is Truffaut, and the title 400 Blows means raising hell. There it is in our cinematic movements, late 50s, early 60s, and then certainly influences the filmmakers of the 60s and 70s. Truffaut starts his career as a film critic, and he studies and has some very specific points of view on how films should be made, and then he gets a chance to actually begin making films. He develops the auteur theory, that the director should be much like an author of a novel. Director should control everything and develop a distinct style. They did attempt to redefine the language of film, and they succeeded in a number of areas. In 400 Blows, you remember they used photos, stills, freeze frame. The one at the end lasts an unusually long amount of time. Wipes, pans. There's movement and energy. They're in the streets with their cameras. The stories they choose to tell are not Leave It to Beaver type stories. They're looking for real stories, and they look to their own lives as inspiration for these stories. And the little boy is representative of Truffaut. The family has many flaws. There's no doubt about that. I don't think either of those two should have been parents, right? And the kids certainly didn't get much love or support. The long tracking shot at the end is well known in all film circles, and then the energy within the frame is another trait of the movie. The cuts come at non-traditional times, so they're pushing the boundaries of edit as well. They do use jump cuts, and they do use freeze frames. Even though they're actors, they're making a concerted effort to capture real people in real events. Sounds used to support the theme of the movie. Much of the dialogue is dubbed later too. And then the famous scene at the very end of the film. We left France and journeyed over to Japan for one of Kurosawa's films. I've had a number of people ask me for other recommendations on Kurosawa because they like this so much. I'd go to Seven Samurai if you liked this kind of a film. I used to screen Seven Samurai in the face-to-face class, but it's almost 4 hours, and it had to be screened over 2 different weeks. So I switched over to Yojimbo for its length. But if you're on your own and you want to see a great one, Seven Samurai is one. Throne of Blood is a great one as well. Kurosawa does use color really, really well in his later films. And then one for mature audiences is Akira, I-K-U-R, or R-U, I'm sorry. And this tells, it's a very different story. It's not a samurai story. It tells the story of an older man who's about to die. But point being, Kurosawa is a genius with his storytelling, his cameras, his actors, his blocking. He is an auteur director, and his themes, he's looking for authentic, real people to be samurais, not just cartoon characters. This film specifically is about two gangs. They're both bad, and he wanted to be a hero that would take the middle ground and push two sides against each other. There's no good guy, bad guys here. They're all kind of bad guys. But he still manages to inject a sense of human dignity, beauty, and freedom. Those are kind of themes throughout his movie. It's an absurdist comedy. I mean, certainly this shot right here is tells you just everything you need to know about the town, doesn't it? So Sanjo is not a traditional hero, not necessarily a morally good man, although he does try to help the couple in the film, and then he pays a pretty high price for that. He is watching his handiwork by letting the town kill almost everybody in the town. Cinematography, low angles, deep focus, very, very skillful lighting, and he really succeeds in creating this world of film. Balance and symmetry, his choreography and blocking with his actors is what he's known for. And then his film is so popular that the Italian director Sergio Leone remakes it as A Fistful of Dollars with the American actor Clint Eastwood. Afterwards, we saw To Kill a Mockingbird in 1962, and this is bringing the close to the golden age of Hollywood. Great performance by Gregory Peck, and this told through the eyes of a young girl. There's our cinematic movements. Some of the reasons now things are going to change is people have stopped going to movies, television's become more popular, and then the themes that we see for the 60s. All these things start to combine to challenge this studio system that Hollywood was known for all those years. It does have a specific point of view, and it is a morality tale. It's another example, this film, of all the elements of filmmaking working together. It's high quality cinema with a big Hollywood budget, and then it does use its visual metaphors. Common underdog themes, outsiders, again, standing up for what's right against overwhelming odds. It takes on racism. It uses the traditional narrative arc. I asked you to think about what Boo Radley stood for as somebody that everybody's afraid of, and that is meant to reflect how different races don't get along and don't trust each other, and most of the time it's unfounded and it's based on rumors and lies. Shooting the Dogs a visual metaphor that's taken down the old racist system. And it also shows that the character can shoot. It's not that he doesn't or he fears weapons. He's choosing to be a pacifist. The visual metaphor here, of course, the book, the light, illumination, intelligence will get us through these social situations. Cinematography is just gorgeous. It's so well done. Lighting's extraordinary. Good cuts on the pace in the editing, and it does fit the narrative. And then the acting here, Scout and then Atticus are fantastic. And actually, they do a really, really good job, and they stay friends for the rest of Peck's life outside of a cinema. Sounds are subtle, and you get the real feel that you're in that 1930s South. And closing shot there for To Kill a Mockingbird. At this point, we did talk about traditional story arc. I'll go through that again real quickly. You have intensity on the left, time on the bottom, and then as you move through time in your movie, your intensity should increase. So the setup is to define characters, location, good people, bad people, and then your turning point is actually some kind of event that changes the path of the protagonist. And for the rest of the movie, they are overcoming certain obstacles to get to a climactic event, resolution, falling action, and then the end of the film. And then this week was Easy Rider, so this is the 8th week. And I talked about these up front, but we'll go through them real quick. 69, Unsettling Times. They're influenced by French New Wave. Here's our themes of the 60s. They like the energy of the French New Wave. They're coming out of a time where music is folk bands and the poets are beat poets, and now things get a bit more aggressive, far more aggressive with the rock and roll and then the kinds of poets of that time. One of the reasons for this being able to be done is the smaller camera, less crew members, and they can get out on the road and tell a story. And it fits with the narrative. It's one of the reasons that it works. Remember the time, we always try and keep that in mind when we're looking at history, and the fact that people are not connected together through a common digital connection. When this movie plays now and people see for the first time folks that look like them, sound like them, listen to the same music as them, it's a huge event. The other thing that impacts all of this is they abandon, filmmakers just decide almost to ignore the motion picture production code. These guys were the moral police of the time, and they made sure films didn't turn out like Easy Rider. So you can see the litany of things. It goes much longer than that, but these are all things that could not be in films before that. This is a story. It's about them, about what they're going through at the time, and that certainly includes motorcycles, drugs, sex, freedoms, and then paying the price for it. Cinematography shots, yeah, when your medium matches up with your narrative like it does here, you get a special moment. Pushing the envelope on editing. There's cuts in here that just don't make sense, but the film keeps moving along anyway. Not the best acting performances, probably because everybody's so stoned. It's not a great way to act. They find this out later. It is about sound, and it's about the sound of its time. It too matches up with the themes in the movie, and it's one of the first, if not the first, rock and roll movie that combines this heavy rock and roll. So that's it for your review. I hope it makes sense. Hope it wasn't too long for you, and good luck on the exam. Cheers.